and welcome. I'm Geeta Mohan and you're watching India Today Global. The top story coming in from New York. President Donald Trump said the United States is in charge following the capture of Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro as Maduro appeared before a New York court on drug and weapons charges. Venezuela's acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, offered cooperation and called for dialogue, while Trump warned of further strikes if authorities do not comply with U.S. demands. More on this by Mahashweta Lala.
Don't ask me who's in charge because I'll give you an answer and it'll be very controversial.
What does that mean?
Yes, we're in charge.
Have you spoken with her?
We're in charge.
Have you spoken with her?
As the world and Venezuelans await for the US's next move, acting President Delcy Rodriguez has offered to collaborate with the United States as the deposed leader Nicolás Maduro, who was captured by American forces, appears before a New York court. In a statement on social media, Rodriguez said Venezuela aspires to live without external threats in an environment of respect and international cooperation. She urged President Trump for peace and dialogue, reiterating Maduro's message. The statement also comes amid Trump's threat of another strike on Venezuela if the ruling authorities don't cooperate with the US efforts to open its oil industry and stop drug trafficking. There are mixed reactions on the US action from Venezuelans within the country and abroad. Venezuelans in Barcelona waved flags and sang as they celebrated the topple of Maduro. Venezuelans in Colombia demanded transition of power and called for fresh elections.
This is what has to happen. Why? Because government entities are still not clean, the defense minister still hasn't left, still hasn't handed over power, so we can't let our political leaders take over the government until they leave. It would be a risk to leave them and put our leaders in. That's why we need to go through a transition process, which Donald Trump will lead. He said it clearly. It's a transition process where we will administer the country, and that means cleaning up government entities, cleaning up the country, and then our leaders, our political leaders, will take office through elections or by validating the elections that were already held the year before last.
But in Caracas, supporters of Maduro gathered near the Miraflores Palace, voicing their support for the wrongful arrest of Maduro and his wife. They demanded that Venezuelan sovereignty should be respected.
Today, I'm here in support of President Maduro and his wife, protesting against that unjust kidnapping. We respect the sovereign decisions of all governments and we demand that same respect in return. I want to emphasize that President Trump must rectify his attitude towards us.
Anti-war protesters chanted slogans such as "No, no blood for oil," "Hands off Venezuela's soil," and "Up, up with liberation, down, down with occupation."
No blood for oil, hands off Venezuela's soil.
A reminder of the American voices who spoke out against US involvement in the Vietnam War. In 1989, during President George H.W. Bush, US invaded Panama and deposed the de facto ruler, General Manuel Noriega, who was wanted by the US authorities for racketeering and drug trafficking.
You know, I'm here because I think it's outrageous what the U.S. government did in Venezuela. Whatever you may think of the Maduro government, that's not the issue. But the U.S. government has no right to go into a sovereign country and basically openly say, we're going to take the oil, we're going to take the gold, we're going to exploit the resources. This has nothing to do with defending the working people of Venezuela. That's no concern to the U.S. government, Democrat or Republican alike. And this isn't the first time. You know, there's a whole history of the U.S. intervening in Latin America and around the world to defend the interests of the U.S. ruling class.
The United Nations Security Council also held an urgent session following the Venezuelan crisis. Somalia presently holds the rotating presidency of the Council. Russia and China, both UNSC permanent members, have condemned the US action and urged for the immediate release of Maduro and his wife.
He has become rich, incredibly wealthy, off the misery of untold numbers of Americans, Venezuelans, and others, aiding and abetting international terrorist organizations like Hezbollah.
中方已就美国强行控制委内瑞拉总统马杜罗夫妇表明了立场。
Actions by the US constitute a clear violation of international law and the basic norms of international relations, contravening the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter. China calls upon the United States to ensure the personal safety of President Maduro and his wife, to release them immediately, to cease subverting the Venezuelan government, and to resolve the issue through dialogue and negotiation.
拉政权通过对话谈判解决问题。
Maduro, his wife, son, and allies face charges of providing law enforcement cover and logistic support to major drug trafficking groups, who in return sent profits to high-ranking government officials under Maduro and were given protection in exchange. He has been indicted on 4 counts: narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, possession of machine guns, and destructive devices. Trump's actions have been criticized domestically. Former US Vice President Kamala Harris has criticized Trump of pardoning a convicted drug trafficker, referring to a former Honduras President Orlando Hernandez, who was convicted by US court and then pardoned later by President Trump. Hernandez was sentenced to 45 years in prison for helping drug traffickers and using his government position and helping to bring in hundreds of tons of cocaine into United States. The capture of Maduro is also seen by many as an effort by Trump administration to divert attention from Epstein files, as it comes days after thousands of files were released and more are being expected to be released post-New Year. With Mahashweta Lala, Bureau Report, India Today.
And joining me now is Rohit Sharma, my colleague from Washington, D.C. Rohit, a lot is happening when it comes to Nicolás Maduro, Washington, D.C., as also the latest that you've just put out. Let's begin with that. A post by the State Department clearly spelling out the Monroe Doctrine by the Trump administration, saying the Western Hemisphere, which is what Marco Rubio said in interviews, is ours and there can be no one else. There's no room for anybody else to step into that sphere. That's a message coming in directly from Washington, D.C.
Well, first things first, Geeta, a very happy new year and a great interview with President Putin. We haven't had a chance to talk, but wanted to put it on the record here. So yes, a lot is happening in Washington, D.C. Look, I think, what we've seen over the past 48 hours is what has been now described by even Secretary Rubio as Monroe Doctrine, where Western Hemisphere belongs to the U.S. We've also seen reports coming in and statements coming in from the Mexican president, who herself said that, this hemisphere does not belong to anybody, and, we're not going to tolerate this. So I think President Trump is trying to make a point. He had outlined this in his national security document, which came out last year when he talked about Western Hemisphere. And I think he's taken action on that. Now, it's important to also understand, and we were obviously playing those visuals from UN Security Council, that there have been opposition registered, at least in the UN, by the Chinese and the Russians. But also, we also saw a Venezuelan UN diplomat there talking about it and kind of alluding to the fact which the US has also said, that this wasn't an invasion. If this was, there would probably be nobody in the UN representing Venezuela. So I think it's an uncharted territory. We do not know what's going to happen. A lot will be decided this week. We've been told there could be US delegation meetings with Venezuelans. So we'll have to wait and watch if they fly out to DC or if somebody flies to Venezuela. But as of this time, as of this moment, as President Trump himself has said, the policy of Venezuela would be decided by Washington, D.C.
Right. Right. Also, Rohit, the other very important thing, we can see visuals of Maduro being taken to court. We'll talk about that. Before that, another very important meeting that's underway is at the UN headquarters, the United Nations Security Council meeting. U.S. envoy to the UN has very clearly spelled out that this is not them trying to conquer a country or take over a country or occupy a country. It was in the sphere of legality. But that's not what the others in the room think. And there's certainly a demand now for the release of Maduro. Where is that headed?
Well, look, I think it is, as I said, we do not know, right? I mean, so if you hear to the American side of the things, they obviously have said, and like Rubio said, that we acted on behalf of FBI and DOJ to get this person who they believe is responsible for sending drugs to America and has weapons and whatnot. So again, that's the defense the U.S. has been using, and they're like, we're still working with the VP who was part of the Maduro regime, and they have not invaded the country. There are no boots on the ground. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is we haven't seen something like this where a country would go and remove somebody from power, literally extract them from their home. So I think we do not know how this is going to be, but we do know for a fact, like Gita, I think this is a very evolving situation. I think the US has said it in many interviews now that they are willing to work with whoever's left in Venezuela, and if they don't follow or toe the Washington DC line, then there will be consequences.
Right, and for briefly, Rohit, the court hearings are underway, right? If I'm not wrong.
Yes, it will be presided by Judge Alvin Hellstrom. He's a 92-year-old Clinton appointee, so liberal in that sense. And Maduro will be represented by two judges, Judge Alvin, my bad, the lawyer, two lawyers. Him and his wife have different lawyers, and they would be represented at noon, which again is under proceedings right now.
Okay, so keep tracking developments on that front. We'll keep coming back to you for the latest developments coming in from the New York court in Manhattan. Thank you so much, Rohit, for joining me.
Thank you.
After Venezuela, President Donald Trump has now spoken again about the strategic importance of Greenland for the United States of America. While speaking to reporters, President Trump reasserted that the United States needs Greenland for its national security and added that he would return to the topic in 2 months. Reacting to Trump's comment, Greenland's leader declared enough is enough, and Denmark's allies in Europe affirmed that the Arctic island's future must be determined by its own people. Prime Minister of Greenland, Jens Fredrik Nielsen, said in a statement, and I quote, "When the President of the United States says that we need Greenland and links us to Venezuela and military intervention, it's not just wrong, it's disrespectful." Meanwhile, Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen also in a post urged the US President to stop threatening to take over Greenland. Meanwhile, Germany has also insisted that Greenland is an autonomously administered territory and belongs to Denmark. Trump has advocated for Greenland to become part of the US. Its strategic position between Europe and North America makes it a key site for the US ballistic missile defense system, while its mineral wealth has heightened US interest in reducing reliance on Chinese exports. Trump's interest in Greenland, and if it's included in the United States, could heighten tensions between the US, Europe, and NATO, and may pose tensions and instability in what they want to protect, that's the Western Hemisphere.
We need Greenland from a national security situation. It's so strategic. Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And Denmark is not going to be able to do it, I can tell you.
I think it's a big
You know what Denmark did recently to boost up security in Greenland? They added one more dog sled. It's true. They thought that was a great move.
From Washington to Caracas, oil has become a weapon of power. A US takeover shakes Venezuela, redraws global energy lines, and forces India into a dangerous diplomatic balancing act. Behind the silence lies a billion-dollar question. Could Reliance and ONGC be the quiet winners of Trump's Venezuela gamble? Watch Statecraft to hear and understand the geopolitics of the region.
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious.
The United States has taken control of Venezuela, militarily, politically, and now economically. President Nicolás Maduro is in US custody. American forces were on Venezuelan soil, and President Donald Trump has declared that Washington will run the country until a transition is completed. So they could very well return. For India, this is a moment of sharp contradiction. Publicly, New Delhi has expressed deep concern. Quietly, however, one of the biggest geopolitical shakeups in Latin America in decades may have unlocked a billion-dollar opportunity for Indian energy giants. So while India walks a diplomatic tightrope between Washington, D.C. and the global south, could Reliance Industries and ONGC Videsh be holding a golden ticket hidden inside Trump's Venezuela takeover? Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. India's response to US action in Venezuela was measured to the point of caution. No condemnation, no invocation of international law, no reference to sovereignty or the UN Charter. Indian Ministry of External Affairs spoke of recent developments, neutral language for a full-scale military intervention, and the capture of a sitting head of state. The wording was deliberate. India expressed deep concern, said it was closely monitoring the evolving situation, urged dialogue, and underlined the safety of Indian nationals who are fewer than 100 people. What India did not do was name the United States of America. It did not criticize President Trump, and it did not align itself with the sharp denunciations issued by China, Russia, Brazil. Even Europe seemed largely divided by Trump's action. This silence is not confusion, it is calculation. India is negotiating a trade deal with the Trump administration. It is still smarting from 50% tariffs imposed by Washington, including penalties over Russian oil purchases. Delhi knows that public outrage today could translate into economic punishment tomorrow. But there is another reason for restraint, one that has nothing to do with diplomacy and everything to do with oil. Venezuela is not just another crisis zone. It holds the world's largest proven oil reserves, over 300 billion barrels. And buried under years of sanctions, mismanagement, and isolation are stranded Indian investments worth billions of dollars. At the center of the story is ONGC Videsh, India's overseas oil arm. For years, OVL has been trapped in Venezuela by US sanctions. Fields it owns are dry not because the oil isn't there, but because it could not bring in rigs, equipment, or even audit its accounts. Then there is the money Venezuela owes India, over $536 million in unpaid dividends up to 2014, and nearly the same amount again for the years after that. Frozen because Venezuelan authorities refused audits. In total, close to $1 billion locked away by sanctions and chaos. Trump's takeover of Venezuela changes the equation overnight. Under US control, sanctions are expected to be selectively eased. American oil majors are already set to return. Infrastructure will be refurbished, exports restarted, and critically, companies that were previously blocked may now be allowed to operate under US licenses. From stranded assets to 100,000 barrels per day, from frozen dividends to fresh cash flow, from sanctions paralysis to strategic leverage. This is the hidden upside of Trump's Venezuela gamble. But it comes at a price. India will have to live with the contradiction, condemning instability in principle while quietly benefiting from its outcomes. Thank you for watching Statecraft. After capturing Nicolás Maduro and his wife on charges of drug trafficking and possession of weapons, Elon Musk congratulated President Donald Trump. Billionaire Musk on X congratulated Trump and said the arrest of the deposed Venezuelan leader is a win for the world and a clear message to the evil dictators everywhere. This is also a step towards renewing the strained relations between Trump and Musk. The Tesla CEO had also attended the New Year's Eve party at Mar-a-Lago. Now, Musk also shared a picture of him dining with President Trump and the First Lady. The photograph was taken at Mar-a-Lago in Florida, and Musk commented, and I quote, "2026 is going to be amazing." As India continues to reel under US tariffs of additional 25%, the United States continued to build its pressure. Speaking to reporters, Trump warned that India could see more tariffs coming if it did not stop purchasing Russian oil. U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, who was also on board Air Force One with the president, said Indian ambassador to the United States, Vinay Quatra, told Graham that India was buying less Russian oil and wanted him to tell Trump to relieve the tariff. Graham is trying to bring in a tariff bill that would impose a 500% tariff on imports from any nation that purchases Russian oil. India today got in touch with the Ministry of External Affairs and is awaiting a response.
They wanted to make me happy, basically. Modi's a very good man. He's a good guy. He knew I was not happy, and it was important to make me happy. They do trade, and we can raise tariffs on them very quickly, and it would be very bad for them.
So he put a 25% tariff on India for buying Russian oil. I was at the Indian ambassador's house about a month ago, and all he wanted to talk about is how they're buying less Russian oil. Would you tell the president to relieve the tariff? This stuff works. So I'm hoping we'll bring the bill up, and it's from 0 to 500.
And Pranay Upadhyay, my colleague, joins me for more on this. Pranay, tariff aside, any reaction from the Ministry of External Affairs? This is serious.
So far, there is none. But, our sources are telling that this shows that, Senator Lindsey Graham only validated that the Indian ambassador to Washington, D.C. is doing his job because it is his job to explain the U.S. lawmakers that, how India is working and we are serious in doing business with the United States. But this is deplorable, Geeta, that because, while coughing, aboard Air Force One, Lindsey Graham also coughed about the truth, about the facts that, how Indian ambassador tried convincing him that, how India is dealing with the Russian oil issue and how India is seriously engaging. But this clearly shows that, whatever efforts are being done by either side, that has not worked so far because, and it's going to be 1 year, full 1 year of the engagement between India and United States to conclude the bilateral trade agreement because it was launched on February 2025. Both the leaders announced it in Washington, D.C. And in November, December, we had a last round and both the sides expressed their satisfaction that, there is considerable progress. But I think it is stuck at the level of the leadership. And I think President Donald Trump is actually looking at something which can really make him happy. So now he has to define that what makes him happy. But so far, nothing has worked. And the bilateral trade agreement negotiations are still on and it is still pending to be concluded.
Well, the making him happy comment also has not gone down well in New Delhi, as also the fact that Lindsey Graham is spilling the beans in public of conversations that were held in private. Pranay Upadhyay, thank you so much for joining us. We'll have to wait and see how the Indian administration reacts to this entire development, the statements, and whether there's going to be any protest on what has been said so far. Shifting focus, a security scare was reported at U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance's Ohio residence after an intruder was spotted near the property and windows at the house were shattered, prompting an overnight response from the U.S. Secret Service and local police. The incident occurred at Vance's East Walnut Hills home. Details remain limited, but authorities confirm that a suspect was detained in connection with the incident. Now, amid U.S. attack on Venezuela and the arrest of Nicolás Maduro, President Trump had warned that Iran would get hit very hard too by the United States of America if protesters die during demonstrations which have increased due to soaring inflation against the regime. A social media video showed protesters being fired upon in the western town of Malak-Shahi in Iran's Ilam province. State-affiliated news agencies said a security forces member and 2 demonstrators were killed in Malak-Shahi when what they called armed protesters tried to enter a police station. Iranian Foreign Ministry condemned the voicing of support from the United States and Israel for protesters following days of unrest sparked by soaring inflation. According to the rights group, at least 16 people have been killed during a week of unrest in Iran. This is the biggest protest since the 2022 protests that broke out after the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini.
There's been protesters killed in Iran. You said we were locked and loaded, ready to go. What is the line there for when the U.S. is going to get involved in those protests?
We'll take a look. We're watching it very closely. If they start killing people like they have in the past, I think they're going to get hit very hard by the United States.
Actions or statements raised by figures such as the Prime Minister of Zionist regime or some radical American officials regarding Iran's internal affairs amount under international norms to nothing more than incitement to violence, incitement to terrorism, and incitement to killing.
That's all on this show for now. Thank you for watching. Goodbye and take care.